Welcome to Sharkie's Gaming Controllers. I'm Sharkie, and in today's video we'll be taking a look at the Cable Guy's Borderlands 3 Claptrap, the original phone and controller holder. So first, let's take a look at this packaging. So straight away you can see Claptrap through the packaging there, looking very detailed and pretty awesome. On the box itself, you've got Borderlands 3 logo, as well as the Cable Guy's logo. Down the bottom here, it shows Claptrap holding what looks to be similar to a PS4 controller. Here it says that Claptrap, the original phone and controller holder. It also advertises that it includes a 2-meter micro USB charging cable. On the side, it shows an image of Claptrap again holding what looks to be the PS4 controller. And also here it shows instructions on how you actually put the controller on the stand. On the other side, it sort of shows you how you get Claptrap ready to hold the controller. It shows you how there's a little mechanism that you actually have to pull out before you put the controller on the stand. On the back, it shows the back of the stand, as well as advertising that it comes with that cable again. Gives you a bit of a blurb about the holder, and some logos down the bottom. The bottom of the box also just has some logos on it. So once you remove everything from the packaging, this is what you get. You get the Claptrap controller holder, and he just looks amazing. Look at that incredible detail. Really looks great, and he's a great size as well. So if you measure from the top of his antenna here down to the bottom of his base, he's 9 inches or 23 centimeters tall, so he's quite a good size. You also get the 2-meter micro USB charging cable as well. So it's got USB on one side and then micro USB on the other side. So taking a better look at Claptrap himself, he looks really great. They've added so much detail to the figure itself. There's some battle damage there, it looks like some wires coming down his arms. The coloration is really nice. They've done a really nice job with actually replicating Claptrap from the game. Just really looks nice. Even if you weren't going to use this as a controller holder, you could quite easily put this on display. It would make quite a nice display piece. Now the first thing to note about this controller holder versus some of the other Cable Guys is most of the Cable Guys, the controller sits on the arms. But not this one. This one actually has a little stand that comes out here, and you kind of got to get your nails underneath and just kind of wiggle it out a bit. And it slots out like that, and as you can see it extends out so it matches the same sort of groove in his hands. This is basically so the controller will sit on this versus sitting on his hands, because his hands are just not strong enough. But you know, if you didn't want to use it as a controller stand, you can simply just push that in and it'll be out of the way, and you can easily just put this on a shelf on display. Taking a closer look at some of the other details, it looks really nice. As you can see, there looks like mock damage in the body there on his lens. You know, on the wheel here. Some nice looking cables going down his arm there. Some really nice details. They've really done a good job at recreating Claptrap. On the bottom it just says Cable Guys. And the bottom is just a standard black plastic base. It's quite sturdy though. But yeah, it's a really nice looking controller holder. Definitely a cool thing. Especially if you're a fan of Borderlands or a fan of Claptrap. This is definitely something that'll be cool on a shelf. Especially once you've got the controller in his arms. So now let's take a look at Claptrap holding some controllers. Now the first thing we need to do is pull this middle tray out. The reason we need to do that is of course that Claptrap doesn't actually hold the controller with his hands because his hands are just far too weak. So you just pull out this tray all the way, and it lines up with the hands quite nicely, and you can see how much stronger it is in comparison to those arms. So the first controller we'll take a look at is the PlayStation 4. So when slotting it in, It sits in quite nicely just under the lens there and looks quite cool. Now this controller is quite stable. It does move a little bit more forward. You can see it there. It does have a bit of movement, but thanks to that kind of front cover of the tray, it sort of stops it falling forward. Of course, if you gave it enough force and you bumped this, it might fall and topple over, but sitting on a shelf, it shouldn't be a problem. It does have a bit more sideways motion there, but again, just sitting on a shelf undisturbed, it shouldn't be a problem. And Claptrap's arms do help with the stability and sort of catching the weight of the controller a little bit. Now you can charge this controller using the included micro USB cable that comes with this kit. So if we just plug this in here. Now when you put it in the stand with the cable on, you'll notice the controller will lean forward more. This is because that cable is sort of leaning against the lens there, pushing it a bit more forward. The cable though doesn't affect stability. If anything, it actually makes it a little bit more stable because the cable's pushing it in a more tighter position. It still has a bit of sideways motion though. But again, if you left this on the shelf charging, not bumping it, not touching it, then you should be fine. I don't think this controller would fall off quite easily. So next, let's have a look at the Xbox One controller. So slotting it into place and centering it a bit, looks quite nice. Stability wise, it's quite good as well. It doesn't have much movement. It doesn't seem to move as much as the PS4 controller. Again, with enough force, I'm sure you could topple this off the stand quite easily. But if it's just sitting there undisturbed, it shouldn't be a problem. It does move a bit more side to side than the PS4 controller does. But again, if you don't bump it, it shouldn't be a problem. And once again, Claptrap's arms are helping with the stability a bit. Now you can also charge this controller with the included micro USB cable. Just plug this in here. Once it's plugged in and you slot it back into the stand, it doesn't really affect much. The cable does obscure Claptrap's lens though. Doesn't really affect stability much, it's basically the same. But like I said, if you don't disturb it, you leave this charging on a shelf, you shouldn't have an issue with it. So next, let's try the Switch Pro controller. So it slots in quite nicely. And this controller sits quite securely as well. It does move a lot more forward in comparison to both the PS4 and Xbox One. So this one, if you hit the top of the controller with enough force, I would say it would easily tumble off here. But again, if you're not disturbing it, it's pretty solid. I don't think you're going to knock it off unless you bump it. Sideways, it does have a bit more motion than the Xbox controller did. The arms do again help sitting it in its place, but again, if you bump this, you might knock it off the stand. Now you can't use the included micro USB cable to charge it, but if you've got your own USB-C controller cable, then of course you can plug this controller in and still sit it on the stand to charge. The cable doesn't affect much. It does obscure the lens once again, but other than that, it doesn't really change much. So again, stability is the same. The cable doesn't really make a difference in that. So you could quite easily put this on a shelf and have your Switch Pro controller charging, and as long as you didn't bump it or knock it, it shouldn't fall off. It should be quite nice. So now that we've seen Claptrap hold the controllers, let's take a look at some other devices. We'll start with a mobile phone. So putting a phone on the stand here and centering it, it sits quite nicely. The other thing I would recommend doing is pushing this tray in slightly just to make it a bit more of a tighter fit. Once you've got it centered though, it looks quite nice and sits there quite securely. Now it is secure, but if you sort of push it forward, you can still topple the phone off the stand, and of course it can slide from side to side. So it's still taking a matter of caution. If you're going to use this as a phone stand, you don't want this to fall off and break your phone. So if you're going to use it with caution, but it can definitely be used as a phone stand. And of course you can use both smaller phones and bigger phones as well. They'll just lean against Claptrap's lens here. You can also put this in to make it tighter or pull it out to make it a bit more of an angle, depending on what you want. But it can definitely be used as a phone stand. So now let's try with a Switch console. So putting the Switch in there and centering it up. It again sits there quite nicely. It's pretty secure and it looks quite nice, although it basically completely obscures Claptrap. Now while this is quite secure, it does lean forward because it is a heavy device and it will slide side to side. The thing is to be very careful. I wouldn't actually recommend this as a Switch stand because you don't want this falling off and breaking your Switch. The heaviness of the Switch, one little bump and it'll topple forward, and one little bump to the side and you'll send it going down that way. So while it can hold a Switch, I probably wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Overall, this is a pretty cool controller holder. Claptrap looks awesome. The amount of detail they've added to this figure is really great. So even if you didn't want to use this as a controller stand, you could quite easily put this on your shelf as a display piece. It looks pretty awesome. But using it as a controller holder, it works pretty well. In this video I showed PS4, Xbox One and Switch Pro controllers. All three of those controllers work well with this stand. They sit nice and secure. They do have a bit of movement, but unless you knock or bump this, they're not going to fall that easily. So they look pretty great on display with them. And of course you can use this with mobile phones as well, but probably just be a bit cautious, because while the mobile phone sits there and it was quite secure, one slight little knock and you knock your phone off. You don't want to knock your phone off and break it. So just be a bit cautious with phones. With the Switch console, while it can sit on the stand, I wouldn't recommend it. The Switch is a heavy console, so putting it on a stand while it does fit, I would just be worried about knocking it over and breaking your Switch. And of course, this coming with a 2-meter cable is quite a nice thing. It gives you a bit of flexibility in positioning this somewhere on a TV stand, a shelf, or your desk. As long as you're within 2 meters of where you're going to plug that cable in, you have a bit of flexibility of where you want to put it. So you can find a nice place to display your controller while it's charging. So overall, this is a pretty cool looking stand. If you're a Borderlands or a Claptrap fan or collector, then this should definitely be in your collection. And you can also just put this on your shelf as a display piece. So either way, it is great all round. Anyway guys, I hope you liked this video. If you did, then please hit that like button, helps out a lot. Feel free to subscribe, as I'll have heaps more gaming controllers and accessories up very shortly. While you're at it, hit that notification button and share this video with your friends. Thanks again for watching guys, I'll see you in the next one.